So we just finished talking about Shays' Rebellion in our last video, which was an uprising with basically a whole bunch of farmers with pitchforks who took over the federal arsenal. And that prompted our founding fathers to realize, you know what, we've probably got to do something to at least deal with our issues of finances. Okay, so they meet a little while later in what's called the Annapolis Convention. Now, this is Annapolis, Maryland, not Annapolis, where you go floating on the river in Missouri. But the Annapolis Convention, the goal of this was to meet to discuss issues of interstate commerce. So interstate commerce is any commerce or money or business that goes on between states, okay? So at the time of the Articles of Confederation, the federal government didn't have any authority to regulate that or to control that at all. It was just up to the states. They could do pretty much whatever they wanted. So they're trying to figure out how to deal with the issue that the federal government doesn't have any money. They're like, you know what? Maybe interstate commerce is the place to start. So at the Annapolis Convention, while they are dealing with that, trying to discuss all of these issues, the idea of maybe we need a stronger central government comes to the forefront. Okay. So the outcome of the Annapolis Convention was the founding fathers decided that they were going to meet again a little while later in Philadelphia, and they were going to meet to revise the Articles of Confederation. Okay. So then that takes us to the Philadelphia Convention, also known as the Constitutional Convention. Why was it called the Philadelphia Convention? Because they met in Philadelphia. And the Constitutional Convention starts off as with the intention, the goal of revising, so simply changing the Articles of Confederation, okay? So because the Articles they created that really weak central government, one of the problems that we had with that was that if we wanted to change the Articles of Confederation, like if you wanted to amend it, all 13 states had to agree to the change, okay? So you can probably guess how many times the Articles were actually amended. None, okay? Because it's really difficult to get all of the states on board with something. So at the Constitutional Convention, for a little while, they're talking back and forth. Hey, maybe we could change this, maybe we could change this, and then eventually they just decide to scrap the whole thing, okay, and start over. So what we have here is the beginning of a federal system. Federalism, what? Federalism, what? A division of what? A power between the states and the federal government. Okay, so we move from that confederal system to a federal system. So during the discussions at the Constitutional Convention, some things that come to the forefront are dealing with representation in the legislative branch. Okay, remember the legislative branch is the branch that makes laws. So under the Articles, each state had one representative in Congress. Okay, so under the Constitution, we're like, do we want to change that, keep it the same? What do we want to do? So there are a whole bunch of different plans that were proposed. The first one we want to look at is the Virginia plan. And this was proposed by a guy named James Madison, okay? It called for a bicameral legislative branch, which means two houses, and it called for representation based on population, okay? The next plan was proposed by a guy named William Patterson. Patterson is spelled with one T. It called for a unicameral legislature, which just means one chamber. And it called for equal representation in Congress, okay? And then the third thing that we want to look at is, this was kind of like the theme of the entire Constitutional Convention, was the Connecticut Compromise. And this sometimes is called the Great Compromise. And it called for a bicameral legislature. It called for equal representation in one house. And then it called for representation based on population in the other. So it benefited large states and small states, okay? And the last one we want to look at today is the Three-Fifths Compromise. And this is the agreement that was made dealing with slavery in the Constitution. So our founding fathers didn't make a specific decision on what to do about slavery in the Constitutional Convention because they were afraid of one part of our country not accepting the Constitution. So the Three-Fifths Compromise allowed Southern states to count 3/5 of the enslaved population for taxation and representation purposes. I'll stop there. If you have any questions, let me know.